Welcome to this draft guide for beginners. I'm your host Analysis Paralysis, and today we're going to be talking about gameplay, piloting the deck. And for the beginner drafter, beginner player, there's many areas of improvement regarding gameplay, but we will focus on 3 of those today. Starting hand, do we keep it or do we do a mulligan? When opponent is attacking and we need to decide how we want to handle it, they're holding up mana and they have cards in hand. What do we do? And lastly, when we have removal spells in our hand, how do we ration it efficiently? And in the end of the video, I'll give my recommendation to where you can practice Magic where gameplay matters, so you can jump into that if you like and get some practice. First area of improvement, starting hand. The question that I want you to ask yourself is this a good keep? And the variation, can I play Magic with this? And by playing Magic, I mean doing something else than just playing lands before turn 4. If we look at this hand, it's a 1 land hander, and sure, we can play a 1-drop, and if we brick on mana, we can play a second 1-drop, but in my experience, this is a very slow starting hand, where most of the time you'll just watch your opponent play while you hope to draw 1 more land. This is a sketchy keep. Moving on. A 5 land hander. Is this a good keep? We do have a 1 and double black removal spell, Murder, at instant speed. We have something to do turn 3 or turn 4. And hopefully we can draw our 6th land so we can play our bomb turn 6. But chances are, I mean, when I keep a hand like this, I don't draw my 2 drops and 3 drops and 4 drops in the right order. So I sit with a 4-drop turn 2, and then I sit with a 4-drop turn 3, and then I play my 4-drop turn 4, and now opponent has already developed their side of the board, and I'm on defense, and in my book, a 5 land hander is very sketchy. I mean, there's one type of hand there's one type of deck you can win against, and that's the deck that's only drawing lands or only drawing spells. So they're bricking on mana or flooding on mana. But for me, I'm usually losing against everything else with a hand like this. So, tip from Analysis Paralysis. Don't keep a 1 land hander or a 5 land hander as a beginner. What about this one? Is this a keep? It's double green lands and 5 black spells. What do you think? Let's say we have 9 sources of green lands and 8 sources of black lands in our limited deck. What are the chances of drawing a black land? Let's run the numbers in a bit, but first, let's compare it to this hand. We have 1 land of each kind, and we have 5 black sources. Personally, I feel way better about this starting hand, no matter if I'm on the play or if I'm on the draw, because I can, affect the board. What do you think? How much worse is this hand compared to that hand? Let's run the numbers. When you do one calculation, when you're drawing 1 card, you're just that's called running the numbers on probability. But when you're stacking them, when you draw 1 card and then a second card and maybe a 3rd card, and you're trying to compound the probabilities together, then it's called hypergeometric calculations. So big words. And in this double green land, 5 black spell scenario, the chances of drawing exactly the black land on our first attempt is 24%, so it's really low. And I got those numbers by figuring out that we have 40 cards in our deck. We've seen 7. We're drawing 1 from the top of our library, that's the draw step, and we have 8 hits in the deck left, right? 8 mana sources. Yeah, and the chances of drawing exactly 1 or more black lands is 24%. But if we're okay, let's say we're on the draw. So we get 2 draw steps, 1 turn 1 and 1 turn 2. The chances of hitting a black land is 43%. So if we're on the play, this is what we'll see in our 3rd turn. A 43.2% chance of drawing 1 or more black lands. And that's really, really bad, because you're doing nothing with this hand. And on the draw, I would say it's also very slow. Let's compare it to the 1 green land, 1 black land, and 5 black spells. Now we need any land to play Magic. So we have 15 possible lands to draw, and we have 33 cards left. And the chances of hitting one is 45.5%. And if we are okay hitting the land in our first or second draw step, then we'll hit it 71% of the time. So it's really good on the play or on the draw. And if we're on the draw, the chances of hitting our third land in our first, second, or third draw step is 85%. So that's really good. And now when we look at this starting hand again, I think we can agree that it's sketchy. And it's more about gambling on hitting that 43.2% than the comparison, the hitting the 71% or the 85% land drop. In my opinion, it comes down to how much of a risk taker versus how risk averse you are, and how well you handle losing to Mana Screw, whether you're bricking or flooding. And I have a friend who plays Magic for fun, and they would love to keep either hands, because losing is fine and winning is also fine. Participating is everything. But if you're more interested in winning than just participating, or if you're more interested in the higher win percentage play versus the risky but sometimes fun approach, then I think it's a losing move to keep a double green, 5 black spells hand, especially so as a beginner. And that kind of deck consistency that you get when you have 1 green and 1 black mana source in your starting hand, it will just trump the janky, risky starting hand. But if you're a player that enjoy winning big sometimes and losing more than you win, go ahead and keep your sketchy hands. It's allowed, right? And also, on a conversation about risk taking versus being risk avoidant, it's not always right to be cautious. Sometimes you need to take risks in order to win at all. Otherwise, you'll just lose slowly. But when it comes to starting hands, I think the cautious approach for the beginner is the right way to go. And I've been told that the optimal mulligan to keep ratio is roughly 1 out of 10. And if you do fewer mulligans than 1 out of 10, then over a big number of games, you'll have starting hands where you'll just watch your opponent play and you will not hit your lands, or you won't get your spells. So you'll lose to being too prone to taking risks. And on the other hand, if you're over zealous with taking mulligans, each time you do a mulligan, you're giving up a card. And in the long run, doing like a mulligan 1 every 5 starting hands will also be a losing move. But you know what? It also depends on the format. In a hyper-aggressive format where you need to hit the board early and hopefully have some kind of removal in hand early, or you die, then you will probably need to do more mulligans to ensure that you have a 2-drop and removal in your starting hand. So it will be correct in that context to do more mulligans. And in a slower format where, card advantage is everything, then keeping slower, sketchier hands will probably be correct. So you can be correct in that context. And you know what? I didn't want to be the kind of content creator that said, it depends. But here we are. So it is what it is. Let's just move on. Okay, is this a keep? For me, this is the ideal starting hand. We have mana sources of each kind. We have a 2-drop, we have a 3-drop, we even have, everything else is a bonus. We have a combat trick, we have something to ramp into. So I'll keep this every time, no matter if I'm on the play or if I'm on the draw. And a word of caution, don't keep sketchy hands, okay? Next area of improvement, blocking into open mana. Is this a good block? That's the question we're asking ourselves. And opponent is attacking, they're holding up mana, they have cards in hand, and we don't know what they could have. But I want you to ask yourself, what are they representing? What could they have? And in this scenario, they have a 2-drop, a 2/2. We have a 2-drop, similar, exactly the same creature. And they haven't made, it's early, turn 4, they haven't made their land drop yet. We see 2 red mana sources and a green one, and we're holding up 1 green mana. And we have a giant growth in hand. So do we block it, they line up well, okay against each other. So if we block, then we will lose board presence, but we'll trade creatures 1 for 1. I notice beginners are very protective. You could almost say overprotective with their life total. If it's early in the game, it might be okay to let some early damage through while we develop our side of the board. But let's say we commit to a block. Do we use our 1 mana trick to make our bear, Olduvian Bear, into a 5/5? If so, if they have nothing, then we trade our trick for their creature and we let the bear stick around so it can counterattack, right? But the risk here is if opponent has something at instant speed that can, hurt the bear, then we risk losing the trick and the bear for just one of opponent's removal spells. And yeah, in this format, there was a spell called Lightning Bolt that could deal 3 damage at instant speed to any target. So I would be worried about blocking into open mana and, committing really quickly to a trick here. I would be fine trading if I want the game to go long, and I would be okay letting the damage through if I want to race my opponent down to 0, if I think I have a more aggressive deck. But it depends on what I want to do. So don't be overprotective with your life total. Think about, is this a good block? And what are they representing? We know they have cards in hand. So do they have removal spells? Do they have only lands and creatures? Do they have a trick? We don't know what they have, but guessing is allowed and encouraged. And in the beginning, your guesswork will be very stumbling. But as you evolve as a player, and as you familiarize yourself with the set that you're playing, you will start to expect certain cards. You will see them more often, and your stumbling guesswork will evolve to qualified guesses. And you can start to play around opponents' tricks and removal. And it all starts with thinking, is this a good block, and what is opponent representing? Now we have removal spells in our hand, and opponent, they have a creature or they have creatures. We're holding up mana. What do? We ask ourselves, is this a good target? I mean, we know that in the average limited deck, there will be 15 to 17 creatures and 6 to 8 non-creature spells. And if we're lucky, we'll have 5 removal spells. But even if we draw all of our spells and the game goes long, then opponent will outnumber our removal with a ratio of 3 to 1. So we can't hit all of our opponent's creatures with our removal. So how do we use removal efficiently? What I want to introduce is the concept of bombs. There'll be really, really strong cards in the format that if they can hit the battlefield and stick around, they will probably win the game with the player who plays them. So we want to target our removal spells with their bombs. That's the preferable target. And if we can't find those, there are these really above average cards that have a high power level, or they work really well in the deck that opponent has crafted. So they're making the whole deck better. But what I notice is that the average beginner is very trigger happy with the removal. So they're okay using their removal as fast as possible and on my filler creatures. And I had to add those to my deck to come up to 23 cards in my deck. But as you get better at card evaluation, the better you will be at assessing threats. You will know which is a bomb, which is an above average card, and what is just a filler that can, stick around. So we don't want to use our removal to answer filler creatures on reflex. And it all starts with the question, is this a good target? And we're deliberating this question at beginner level. Also, if we would invite an expert into the conversation here, they would want to have more nuance to the conversation. They would say, is this a bomb-heavy format where you need to find answers for the bombs or you die? Well, in that context, I would ration my removal more cautiously. I will hold up more removal for the right targets, or I would die. In a fast format where you need to really survive the early turns, then I would be more liberal with my usage of removal. I would use it really fast and really quick, and it would be correct in that context, because if I don't, I die. Yeah, so we want to evolve our ability to be patient hunters and not use the removal on reflex. And most of the time, that's the correct approach. But sometimes you should use it on a target that is presented early, and sometimes it's correct to save it for opponent's bombs. But starting just to think about, is this a good target, I think will help you find better targets for your removal and will win you more games. All right, so in summary, is this a good keep? Is this a good block? Is this a good target? That's the question that I want you to ask yourself as you play. But where can we practice good play patterns? I have an idea. My recommendation is that you go to Jump In, an event style on Magic the Gathering Arena. My read on this event is that the decks are of similar power level. It's two halves of decks that you jam them together. It's 40 cards in the deck. It's roughly 23 playables and roughly 17 lands. And it's very cheap to enter. There's no elimination clause for winning too much or losing too much. You can play as long as you like with the deck that you have. It's designed in a way that you only see 1 or 2 bombs in your deck, and a handful of above average creatures, and a dozen or so filler creatures, 3 to 5 removal spells, and a trick or 2. So if we consider that the decks we play here and meet will be of a similar power level, then it also holds true that the way you pilot these decks will be decisive. And as you play, if you notice that your win rate is actually going up from a negative win rate, you're winning 40% of the time, to 50% and even above, then I would say that that's a sign that you're progressing as a player. A challenge that you can challenge yourself as you play this event, even if it's low stake and casual, you can try to make it sweaty. And the first step is to familiarize yourself with your deck. You read the cards, you try to figure out, what does this deck want to do? Does it want to win fast? Is it more a grindy deck that want to survive early and win later? What's my win condition? And I notice that when I read the cards in my deck and try to figure out what the deck wants to do, then I can play into the strengths of my deck. And I feel like I gain an edge by just knowing what my deck wants to do and playing to its strengths. And sometimes I find, it's called synergy. When you talk about how some creatures get better together, sometimes I get an edge by playing certain creatures early, and they kind of enable a later played payoff. So sometimes I have a creature that gets really good if my graveyard is filled with creatures. Yeah, so then I trade very liberally with my opponent's creatures, and then I play my payoff that gets really great when my graveyard is filled. So you can say that sometimes you need to do objectives, and if you do, then you get a payoff. And recognizing, how do I get an edge with my deck? What does it want to do? How can I play to those strengths? How can I fulfill these objectives? That kind of value adds up. And I think it's exactly the same kind of exercise that we're doing with our limited decks. What does it want to do? How can I find cards that pull in the same direction? And how can I play to this deck's strengths? Do I want to win early? Do I want to survive early and win later? Do I just want the game to drag on so I can play my bombs? What's the plan? Yeah, so even if Jump In is very casual, you can play it competitively all the same and get your practice. Hey, you made it all the way. Great. Good luck out there, and I'll see you next time.